In the dark skies, clouds roil and thunder as Invincible and Immortal engage in a fierce battle. The confrontation reaches a peak when Immortal seizes Invincible by the throat, furiously accusing him and Omni-Man of their transgressions against Earth. Suddenly, Immortal's arm is severed by the familiar figure of Omni-Man, who has returned to decisively slay Immortal. Omni-Man then tells Mark, aka Invincible, about Immortal's storied past as an ancient warrior and leader who once protected humanity. Elsewhere in the city, a hooded man watches a giant screen displaying Mark Grayson as Invincible, urging humans to cease their rebellion against the Viltrumites, claiming they are here to protect Earth.
And if you still think you can stop us, don't forget, I'm invincible.
This man, known as Angstrom, reports to Robot and a short-haired Adam Eve in an underground base, revealing that Nolan and Mark are not currently in their sights and retrieves a powerful weapon. However, the two Viltrumite destroyers soon arrive, swiftly killing Rudy and several resistance members. Invincible, despite still feeling a strange affection for Eve, paralyzes her and promises to fix her later. Mark and Nolan coldly inform the resistance members of their impending execution. Angstrom, enraged, vows justice and destruction, but his speech is cut short by Nolan, who orders Mark to expedite the executions. Back in the main universe, a month after Nolan's departure, Mark struggles with his father's betrayal while fulfilling his duties as Invincible. He pleads with Cecil for a mission assignment, but Cecil refuses due to Mark's trauma from the Chicago incident. Meanwhile, the Guardians of the Globe are struggling to handle a giant creature, and Robot faces challenges in balancing his human life with leading the team. Cecil appoints the revived Immortal as the new leader of the Guardians and introduces Bulletproof for additional strength. At home, Debbie reunites with her old friend Olga, who gives her an important card. Despite Debbie's initial refusal, Olga leaves it behind. Meanwhile, the Mauler twins escape from prison through portals, aided by Angstrom Levy. Angstrom, revealing his ability to traverse the multiverse, collects alternate versions of himself to harness their knowledge. He enlists the twins' help in building a device to transfer their collective memories into himself, aiming to use this knowledge to advance Earth's technology and save other planets. At high school, Mark receives support from his friends Todd, Amber, and Adam Eve.
When I was a kid, I always wanted to be my dad. What if I become him and I don't even know it?
Cecil and the GDA discover that the Mauler twins are building a dangerous machine and send Mark to stop them. As the twins begin transferring memories into Angstrom, Invincible arrives and battles them. Despite Angstrom's pleas, Mark's attack forces him to summon alternate versions of the Mauler twins. They overwhelm Mark, prompting Angstrom to abort the transfer, causing a violent explosion that destroys the warehouse and kills many of the Maulers and Angstrom's alternate selves. The Guardians arrive to assist, and Rex, Splode, and Cecil reassure Invincible of his actions. In the aftermath, Mark finds Debbie, who is lying in a drunken stupor, and she gives him a college acceptance letter. Later, Immortal confronts Mark, expressing his distrust. The GDA continues to search the destroyed warehouse, discovering one disfigured Mauler twin among the rubble. Angstrom, now horrifically mutated and mentally unstable, vows vengeance against Invincible. The surviving Mauler twin, enraged by Angstrom's betrayal, swears never to work for anyone else again as he leaves the wrecked site. It's the high school graduation for the squad, and it seems like Mark is missing it for some hero work. Mark has to attend to the destruction caused by Doc Seismic and his Magmanites as they are devouring all the monuments across the country. Takes him a while to get the better of the Magmanites, but he handles the Doctor in one go. Mark is back at the graduation as they celebrate the most awaited day.
Marcus Sebastian Grayson. Samantha Eve Wilkins.
Each make plans for the summer vacations at Eve's treehouse afterwards, as they wait for better days ahead. The USA Space Administration fires the stowaway Martian, thinking the spaceman needs to get his head straight. Eve arrives at downtown Chicago and helps rebuild a broken apartment and builds a community park after cleaning up the mess around. Mark is ordered to take down a rampaging, hero-stricken man in the Midnight City. Mark is surprised at the existence of the city since it was cursed long ago. He meets the sidekick of Darkwing, who has gone off the grid, and he is mad at Mark for what Omni-Man did to all the Guardians. Surprisingly, the sidekick manages to take Mark into the Shadowverse, which is a dark place in the Dark City, and soon, Mark manages to strike him down. Debbie confronts Cecil about Mark working for him, but is shocked to see Donald alive. After fixing an apartment and building a playground in Chicago, Eve argues with her father, believing he cannot accept she can help with her powers. The stowaway Martian is inspired by Martian Man's heroics and joins the Guardians as the Shapesmith when they encounter the Lizard League running havoc in the city. Mark pays a surprise visit to his girlfriend at the community center and takes her flying off to Las Vegas for a lunch date at the top of the duplicate Eiffel Tower. They share a passionate moment, but Cecil calls up Mark for something urgent. Mark meets with Cecil, who explains he must appease the Atlanteans for Aquarius's death by marrying the widowed queen symbolically, but the rules have changed in the kingdom, and in a surprise trial by combat, Mark battles a kaiju called the Depth Dweller and is injured when its roar causes him auditory pain. Cecil sends immediate backup with underwater cruise missiles, hitting the monster and releasing it at the same time. Against Cecil's orders, he saves the Atlanteans when the kaiju attacks them. But is taken into the depths by the monster. Eve visits her mother and learns about the financial difficulties as her father has lost her job, and it leads to an ugly confrontation with her father later on. The Lizard League meets at their headquarters as Salamander, Iguana, and Komodo Dragon, and their army of seemingly more than 300 mind-controlled humans are cheering on Supreme Lizard. King Lizard unexpectedly shows up and shoots Supreme Lizard in the head, killing him almost instantly. King Lizard then assumes leadership over his fellow team members. In an alternate reality, a mutated and vengefully embittered Angstrom arrives to Earth, where another evil Mark is placed in a reinforced metal shackle bond by the alternate GDA. He asks Mark's questions about his current predicament. The GDA agents, along with different versions of Cecil and Donald, arrive to stop Angstrom. But he does not come for a fight, and merely leaves, leaving the evil Mark hysterically demanding his presence to return. We come to a fresh story where the origins of Alan the alien are explained. Descending from the planet Unopa long ago, his world was attacked by the Viltrumites and taken over for decades by them. The Unopians survived under them, planning for a fight back one day. They tried their best to defeat the Viltrumites, but the enemy was too powerful. Fortunately, some of the Unopians escaped their own planet and started breeding their species for a new beginning. They were soon discovered, and they joined the coalition of planets to help stop the Viltrum Empire. Alan was the hope of all his people and the coalition to rise against the Viltrumites, but he failed in the end. The coalition assigned Alan the role to evaluate planets for beings powerful enough to challenge the Viltrumites. After many journeys, he came across Earth by mistake and found Mark Grayson, the Invincible. Alan the alien discusses his findings from Earth with the coalition of planets. He explains Mark's defiance and Nolan's abandonment of Earth. While others remain skeptical, coalition leader Thetis supports his findings, believing they now possess an advantage. Thetis reveals to Alan that he believes that there is a mole within the coalition, and tasks Alan to find it. Meanwhile, Mark starts his days at the college, and his mom, Debbie, is almost at the verge of tears. Mark and his friend preps their dorm room, and soon, Mark finds himself having a passionate time with his high school sweetheart Amber at her dorm room.
Don't call me baby.
Got it.
As we go back to Alan, he goes home and soon realizes there's an intruder at his place, but it turns out it's his girlfriend, who also works at the coalition headquarters. They soon start making out at his apartment. Alan and his girlfriend then head out for dinner at the local diner, and they share some laughs while they dine. Unfortunately, Alan is confronted and brutally attacked by 3 Viltrumites, while his girlfriend and others watch on in horror as he gets devoured in space. Thetis comes to visit the injured Alan and the grieving girlfriend at the hospital, then secretly sabotages his recovery. While Mark attends college, Deborah joins a support group for late superhero spouses. She attends the first meeting and meets the counselor and other grieving spouses. After the meeting, she leaves alone, but meets another spouse who has lost his wife recently. They head to a nearby bar and share their grief. Deborah is shocked to learn that acquaintance she made is the husband of the late Alana, the Green Ghost. She later reveals she is Omni-Man's ex-wife and leaves in shame, as the man gets furious at her and warns her not to show up again. Mark heads back to the dorm and his friend wants to know all about his late adventure with Amber. They are visited by an alien creature who Mark interrogates roughly and finds out the shape-shifting, insect-like alien from the distant planet Thraxa. He tells him that his people are in danger and asks for his help, as 42 billion lives depend on the heroics of the Invincible. Mark's friend agrees that Mark should definitely go, and when Mark calls Amber to bid goodbye, she agrees with him as well. Mark starts his journey against Cecil's orders. After 6 Earth days, Mark reaches the planet Thraxa, where he unexpectedly reunites with his father, the Omni-Man.
Hello, son. It's been a while.
Nolan Grayson's tale, the Omni-Man's Odyssey, resumes with him aimlessly wandering outer space after abandoning Earth. Contemplating suicide by being pulled into a black hole, Nolan's resolve falters when he spots a damaged spacecraft heading directly into the abyss. Choosing heroism over despair, he saves the passengers and returns them to their homeworld, Thraxa. Grateful, the Thraxans grant Nolan amnesty and crown him as their monarch. In the present, Nolan encounters his son Mark, aka Invincible, who is shocked by his father's sudden reappearance. Despite an initial confrontation, Mark hugs Nolan, but their reunion quickly turns tense. Nolan persuades Mark to stay, claiming that Thraxa needs their help more than ever. Inside his palace, Mark is introduced to Nolan's new wife, Andressa, and their infant son, his half-brother. Mark is stunned by this new family dynamic. Meanwhile, Debbie Grayson, Nolan's wife, grapples with her despair. She nearly commits suicide before visiting Nolan's grave. Elsewhere, Donald, a GDA agent, searches for Debbie to no avail and discovers remnants of Nolan's past, including destroyed glasses identical to his own. Back on Thraxa, tensions rise as Mark and Nolan argue over Nolan's new life. Nolan explains that after their brutal fight on Mount Everest, he found a renewed sense of purpose among the Thraxans. He warns Mark that Viltrum, their home planet, will target Thraxa because of his defection. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of 3 Viltrumite warriors intent on destroying Thraxa. Mark rushes Andressa and the baby to the caves of Roclame for safety. He and Andressa bond over their complicated relationships with Nolan, and Mark apologizes for his earlier harsh words. Their moment is cut short when Lucan, a Viltrumite, arrives and challenges Mark. Lucan is enraged upon recognizing Andressa and her child as part of Nolan's family. He easily overpowers Mark, but is stopped by Nolan, who acknowledges his past sins and fights Lucan to protect his family. While Andressa and the baby retreat deeper into the caves, Mark and Nolan return to the palace only to find Thraxa's capital decimated and littered with Thraxan corpses. 2 more Viltrumites, Vidor and Thula, arrive. A fierce battle ensues, with Nolan and Mark fighting the Viltrumites. Despite his reluctance to kill, Mark is pushed by Nolan to fight with all his might to protect their loved ones. Mark eventually overpowers Thula, and Nolan delivers a fatal blow to Vidor. However, the fight takes a grim turn when Lucan, presumed dead, reappears and cripples Nolan with a brutal attack. Lucan taunts Nolan before calling his superior to report their victory, then loses consciousness. Debbie is visited by Art, a family friend who helps lift her spirits by reminding her of her strength. Encouraged, Debbie decides to sever ties with Nolan and the GDA, refusing their support and opting to move forward on her own. Adam Eve struggles with her new lifestyle. She abandons her treehouse for the old Teen Team base and clashes with Kill Cannon, a former enemy. Their battle endangers civilians, but Eve ultimately defeats Kill Cannon and saves the innocents. As Debbie clears out Nolan's belongings, Adam Eve returns home to find her father waiting. Meanwhile, in the Pentagon, Donald makes a startling discovery about his own existence. He cuts his arm, revealing not just blood, but also mysterious resilience in his flesh. Mark partially regains consciousness as the Viltrumites haul Nolan back to their home planet for execution. The Viltrumite general orders Mark to prepare Earth for their takeover, leaving Mark in a severely wounded state. Through blurry vision, he witnesses the devastation wrought upon the Thraxan civilization. 2 surviving Thraxans manage to carry him to Andressa, who tends to his injuries. Mark, overwhelmed with guilt for the Thraxans' near destruction, is reassured by Andressa, who tells him that her people do not dwell on blame but always move forward. Seeing Oliver and the Thraxans rally around him renews Mark's spirit. The next day, after aiding the Thraxans in rebuilding their city, an elderly Nuolzot tells Mark it is time for him to return to Earth. Initially, Mark declines. However, Andressa, also aging, advises him that her time is ending and entrusts him with Oliver.
Take your brother with you. Home to Earth.
What?
Mark agrees and takes Oliver back to Earth. Upon arriving at the Grayson residence, Debbie returns from work and is overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of Mark and the baby. In a heartfelt conversation, Debbie bitterly recounts how Nolan has always left disasters for others to clean up. Mark updates her on recent events, and Debbie volunteers to babysit Oliver, leading to a warm embrace between mother and son. Mark then returns to his dorm room, surprising his friend William, who bombards him with questions. Afterward, he steps out to meet Amber, but is unexpectedly visited by Cecil, who is already aware of the baby. Amber is delighted to see Mark and introduces him to her friends. As they leave the couple to catch up, Mark and Amber share their experiences, with Mark expressing regret for not being there for her during difficult times. Meanwhile, Donald confronts Cecil about his situation, leading Cecil to take him to a special white room where humanoid robots like Donald are created. Their argument is interrupted by news of a powerful entity heading towards Earth. Cecil calls in the Guardians of the Globe, who then learn that Shapesmith is a Martian. News breaks of a ship full of squids piloted by the human host body Shapesmith had duplicated. Cecil and the team devise a plan, with Rex proposing a strategy. Cecil personally goes to the Grayson residence to enlist Mark for the Mars mission and discusses the baby with Debbie. Cecil sends the Immortal, Black Samson, Monster Girl, and Rudy to counter the spaceship threat. Rex finds Eve, consoles her about her recent mistakes, and convinces her to rejoin the Guardians. She accompanies the team, while Rex, Ray, and Kate stay behind to handle domestic threats. Expecting no major issues, Rex and his team plan to relax.
Order of garlic knots and some wings.
2 garlic knots!
2 garlic knots.
But the Lizard League, led by the Lizard King, plots to seize control of a nuclear weapons facility. Cecil dispatches the Guardians to the facility, much to Rex's annoyance. They encounter Komodo, Salamander, and Iguana, who are violently taking control. The Guardians engage in a fierce battle, feeling vulnerable and helpless for the first time. Komodo brutally kills Kate by smashing her final 2 clones together, and Ray, seeking revenge, kills Salamander by shrinking inside his head, but is eaten by Komodo when she tries the same tactic on him. Rex, believing she will regrow and defeat Komodo, watches in horror as she is crushed and digested, dying painfully. With only one hand left and severely beaten, Rex desperately fights back, killing Iguana with an explosive charge and blowing apart Komodo's head. Exhausted and wounded, he spirals into despair as the Lizard King emerges with a gun to his head. Meanwhile, the Guardians reach the massive ship piloted by the Squids. Their ship is destroyed, but Eve saves them by phasing them into the enemy ship with a force field. They discover Martians being held captive on a lower level. Bulletproof mindlessly kills a Sequid, alerting the rest of the hive mind. The swarm overwhelms the Guardians despite their best efforts. Eve holds them back with her shield while Rudy builds an EMP from his suit. Elsewhere, Alan suddenly awakens, accidentally tearing open his recovery chamber. Thetis appears, congratulating Alan on surviving the experiments that have made him strong enough to fight a Viltrumite. Initially, Alan refuses to fight, but Thetis reveals himself as the great betrayer of Viltrum and persuades Alan to bring Invincible to Taliscria, believing he can help turn the tide in the war. Moments after Eve's shield shatters, the Guardians try to delay the Squids. Shapesmith saves Robot and Eve, allowing Robot to build an EMP. The Immortal grabs it, but is stopped by Invincible, who claims to be faster and stronger. The Immortal agrees and helps take down the mind-controlled Livingston. Eve and Rudy are discreetly controlled by the Squids, but are saved once more by the EMP device. The Guardians take Livingston away from the Squids and try to escape, but are confronted by the Martian Emperor and Martian guards. The Martians thank Invincible and the Guardians for saving them from the Squids, but want Shapesmith executed. They escape, and Invincible goes into space, rams into the Martian spaceships. Shaking hands with the immortal. Back on Earth, King Lizard shoots Rexplode and walks over the corpses of the Lizard League and Duplicate, making demands to the US government. Rex, still alive after being shot in the skull, attacks King Lizard, rendering his face a bloody pulp, and continues beating him until the GDA arrives. Rex faints, and the agents inspect the corpse, only to notice Shrinking Ray bursting out of Komodo Dragon. The Guardians crash land the Martian ship in front of the Global Defense Agency and arrive to recover. Mark notices Eve staring at doctors fixing Rexplode, while Shrinking Ray is also under extensive care. Later, a funeral takes place, where the Immortal places his hand on Duplicate's casket, expressing how much she meant to him. At the Grayson home, Oliver is now speaking, and Debbie is greeted by Cecil, who asks for their services, but she is unfazed. She then tries to find a tutor, rejecting the first one. April Howsam, a member of the GDA, arrives to help Oliver, assuring there are no conspiracies since she works for Debbie. Mark finally meets with Amber, and they talk about how college has distanced them from each other, trying to find a way to fix their problems. In the hospital, Mark meets Rex, now good friends, and they talk about Amber. Eve arrives and gives Rex books to help with his recovery. Later, Mark finds Donald with William and Rick Sheridan, who has undergone extensive surgery from the GDA. William and Rick decide to explore the college, and Will embraces Rick when they see a plaque listing those mutilated by D.A. Sinclair. At Eve's treehouse, Cecil Stedman offers her a position on the team, but she declines. Amber also arrives. Mark discusses his girlfriend problems with Art, with Mark asking for books written by Nolan. Art gives him the collection. In the dorm room in Upstate, Mark reads a few books. The first is about the legendary Space Rider, a wise but balanced warrior venturing in space and chased by an army of aliens. The next book is about a younger Nolan Grayson on a desert planet, with another Viltrumite colleague, fighting tough Rognars. Cecil meets with the Immortal, who declines seeing the Global Defense's best psychiatrists. Suddenly, Cecil gets an alert about an unknown individual arriving in Earth's atmosphere. The Immortal meets Alan the Alien, and they get into a small fight until Invincible stops the situation.
I thought you were someone else.
The hell is that guy's problem?
His girlfriend just died.
Well, now I feel like a giant douchebag.
Mark and Alan talk about recent events, including Nolan's imprisonment. Alan invites Mark to Tailscria, but Mark declines, saying he missed too much on Earth and has just returned from space. He gives Alan Nolan's books for research and promises to be ready for their war whenever needed. In space, Nolan is in a Viltrumite asteroid prison with many other prisoners. Craig and 2 alien guards order Nolan to return to the Viltrum army. Nolan remains silent, and Craig grabs him by the throat, questioning how 20 years on Earth changed him. Russ Livingston returns home and cleans his apartment. He retches upon seeing old Chinese food and throws up in the sink. A single sequid from the spaceship from Mars emerges and attaches itself to him. In another universe, a 4-armed tailor helps someone put on a suit, revealing Angstrom, no longer wearing a dark cloak. Angstrom transports himself to various other universes and back to the current one. Mark and Amber attend a comic convention. Finally, they have some time together.
Oh man, I'm a huge fan!
Thanks, buddy. Means a lot.
Mark is excited to see his favorite comic writer and producer, and in for a signed copy. Unfortunately, he gets an urgent call from Eve to attend to save Rex, as he has gone after a criminal without full recovery. Rex is fighting a giant squid monster, and his soldiers are breaking a vault. Rex blasts his weapons on the creature, but it doesn't hurt him much. When the creature gets him by his neck, it takes the thunderous punch from the Invincible to save him at the end. Invincible goes after the ones who broke the vault, as Rex manages to finish the squid monster with his new and improved energy blasts. Rudy and Monster Girl once again gets into argument over Rudy trying to fix her. Black Samson and Bulletproof are watching this, and Bulletproof is not impressed with everything happening around with the members. Meanwhile, at the continuous request of Donald, Cecil allows him full authorization to all his files, where Donald discovers that he has died numerous times and that the original Donald ordered the memories to be erased. William calls Donald, and it seems Rick is trying to jump off a building to commit suicide. Donald shows that he is mostly machine, just like Rick, and manages to console him at the end. Debbie comes back from another successful sale, and her associate invites her for dinner with him. She is greeted by the young Oliver, who is growing up in a splendid manner, and April says that Oliver will do wonderfully. Mark has to meet the dean of the university, who turns out to be his school principal. He warns him strictly regarding the grades and gives him 1 month to show improvement. Later on, Mark takes off the suit and his earpiece and goes on a spectacular date with Amber. He takes her to space and back, they share kisses in the sky, they roam around the city in carnivals, and finally, they have a romantic dinner at a restaurant. While on the date, Mark is confronted by the Viltrumite Anissa, who threatens him by taking Amber hostage. He goes to meet her in the sky, and she reminds him his duties to the Viltrum Empire. As per Cecil's orders, Mark abruptly leaves to save a cruise ship from a kaiju. Anissa joins him, saving the passengers. Despite proving Earth's weakness, Anissa fails to convince Mark to complete his mission and grievously beats him before ultimately sparing him and leaving to report back to Craig. Wounded in body and wounded in mind, Mark goes to see Amber, who is shaken to the core by the incident. They have a heart-to-heart conversation and decides to go their separate ways. Amidst this, the Viltrumites confront a passing Alan. Anissa comes to confront the Unopian, who is actually surprisingly too strong for her disbelief. Finally, Alan feigns defeat and allows himself to be captured. After breaking up with Amber, Mark is looking at the horizon on a rooftop when he is called by Angstrom Levy, who has taken Debbie and Oliver hostage in their own home. The final episode opens on the Viltrumite prison ship, where Nolan is engaged in a fierce battle with defense robots. He fights off the robots with ease, only to be confronted by a group of guards who attempt to subdue him. Nolan overpowers them as well, but before he can deliver the final blow, General Craig intervenes. Craig sarcastically congratulates Nolan for surviving the inspection for his execution, but Nolan remains unfazed. He is escorted back to his cell, and along the way, he spots Alan, the Unopian. They communicate telepathically, hinting at a deeper connection and shared plans. Meanwhile, a man is jogging through the suburbs, encouraging himself to complete his run. At the same time, Mark returns home to find Angstrom holding his mother, Debbie, and brother, Oliver, hostage. Angstrom taunts Mark, who initially doesn't recognize him. Angstrom reminds Mark of the damage he caused to his brain due to his many duplicates in various dimensions. Mark finally recalls encountering Angstrom during a fight with the Maulers. Angstrom accuses Mark of ruining his plans and throws Debbie and Oliver aside, challenging Mark to a fight. Angstrom traps Mark in an unknown dimension where he finds himself surrounded by intelligent raptors who are surprised to see a human.
I smelled it first. It's mine.
Stay back! No one's eating me!
Oh, egads, it speaks!
Mark impresses the raptors with his ability to fly, but the portal soon reopens and he returns home. Angstrom continues to torment Mark by sending him through various dimensions. Debbie tries to stand up to Angstrom but gets injured in the process. Mark is sent to another dimension where he sees versions of himself acting as a dictator, killing thousands alongside his father. Back in the current dimension, Angstrom becomes enraged when Debbie speaks up again, and he attacks her, breaking her hand. He throws Oliver aside and threatens Debbie once more. Mark, who has just defeated a group of desert smugglers, hides as Angstrom searches for him through a portal. Mark ambushes Angstrom and returns home to find Debbie severely injured. Enraged, he attacks Angstrom with a newfound fury. Despite Angstrom's enhanced strength, Mark's anger over his family's suffering gives him the upper hand. They are transported to a deserted planet where Mark beats Angstrom to a bloody pulp, ultimately killing him in a fit of rage. Mark immediately regrets his actions, realizing he has crossed a line by killing out of anger. A portal opens, and Mark's guardian friends, led by Eve, appear, aged 20 years. They open another portal for Mark to return home. Before he leaves,
I love you, Mark. I have for a very long time, and when you disappeared, I was devastated.
Mark returns to his destroyed house and learns from Cecil that his mother and brother are safe. He goes to see his injured mother, and they embrace with relief. Rudy and Monster Girl have a heartfelt conversation, resolving their issues and making amends. In the icy mountains, the immortal lives alone, returning from his daily catch. Kate, who has been living through her copies, appears, and they reconcile, finding healing together. Mark, Debbie, and Oliver return to their house, now under renovation by Cecil, and it looks as if nothing had ever happened. Mark visits his college and sees Amber with her friends, but decides to fly back to meet Eve, who is eagerly waiting for him. They hug, and although Eve tries to comfort him, Mark struggles to express his feelings. Back at the Viltrumite prison, Alan contacts Nolan telepathically, sharing his experience with Mark. Nolan is surprised but has accepted his fate. However, Alan invites him to join the fight against the Viltrumite Empire, leaving an open-ended possibility for Nolan's future. That concludes the second season as we eagerly await a promising third season with Invincible. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our video with your friends. Thanks for watching.